All the tech against, those are approved. And to note the action log. Any points people want to pick up on the action log? No? Okay. So then item 5, the performance management framework and corporate performance report. And Jules Lent is going to present that for us.
Thank you, Chair. This report represents the culmination of a collaborative piece of work for which I would like to thank members, constituent authority officers and officers from across the Combined Authority for their contributions. The new performance management framework presented here will ensure that we have a consistent, streamlined and joined-up approach to performance management in line with the expectations of the English Devolution Accountability Framework. We hope it helps you have insight into the achievement of our goals and our impact on wider society. This report follows on from the interim performance management report presented to this committee in June. It is the beginning of a quarterly cycle, with further performance reports due in November and January. The report has a number of parts. Members are asked to note the draft performance management framework in Appendix A. This will be presented for approval to the Combined Authority Board on Wednesday. Members are also asked to scrutinise 3 sets of performance information. A new set of corporate key performance indicators, or KPIs, presented in a balanced scorecard and dashboard in Appendix B. A dashboard of the most complex programmes and projects, presented in Appendix C. And a narrative report on headline priority activities. We have categorised KPIs as owned by the CPCA when the ability to change the indicator lies wholly or mainly with the Combined Authority. An example is metric 25, gigabit broadband availability. I need to bring to members' attention that there is a late amendment to these indicators which has unfortunately not pulled through to the final report. Please accept my sincere apologies for this. The current period and previous period position for metric 16, which is the number of contract waivers submitted, should be 2, not 1, and this should give an amber rating, not green. Therefore, with this amendment, of 12 metrics owned by the CPCA, 1 is going in the wrong direction, so is RAG rated as red. 2 are unchanged, so are RAG rated as amber. And 9 are going in the right direction, so RAG rated as green. Some of the KPIs cover the position of the wider Cambridgeshire and Peterborough region, where the outcome and the ability to change the indicator does not lie wholly or mainly with the combined authority. An example is metric 5, number of business startups. We have categorised these as state of the region KPIs. 9 of these 15 indicators are RAG rated red, and the remaining 6 are green. The most complex programmes and projects are those that are considered most significant in terms of value, strategic fit, and where there would be significant impact if we were to fail to deliver. For example, the Peterborough Station Quarter. These are RAG rated on the level of confidence in successful delivery. Of 7 programmes and projects, 4 are rated amber, and the remaining 3 are green. We recognise that it can take 2 to 3 years to develop and embed a new performance management system, so further work is planned to refine how we measure and manage performance, and we will rely on your feedback to guide this work. Therefore, members are also asked to comment on how we could improve how our performance information is measured and presented. For example, you will notice that Appendix A presents summary information for all the KPIs on one page in a balanced scorecard, in addition to a dashboard for each KPI that goes into greater detail. We need your feedback on the balanced scorecard. For example, whether there's anything missing or surprising in the flow through from strategic objectives to indicators and metrics. Also, you might find it counterintuitive that the current period can be up to 4 years ago. This is because current period refers to the most recently available data and is determined by how frequently the dataset is refreshed. We have sought to provide a useful comparator for each KPI, often a national average, and we are interested to know whether you find this helpful. For example, metric 6 is new housing completions per 1,000 of the population. This metric is RAG rated red because performance has gone down when the desired movement is up. However, despite this dip, the comparator shows that performance has been consistently higher than the East region and national averages. Lastly, we would welcome your feedback on whether it would be useful to have more performance reporting against targets. We are working on setting and agreeing more targets relating to the corporate KPIs where appropriate. Once these are in place, we will be able to RAG rate performance against targets in addition to RAG rating against direction for improvement. I'm very happy to take questions.
Thank you. Members, any questions?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for supplying such a lot of data. I think what would be helpful is, I was just looking at Appendix 3, which is a balanced scorecard on corporate key performance indicators. So I think bringing that more front and central would be helpful. And then I guess the challenge, and I think you raised it earlier on, is if you look at the state of the region, we're not looking very good. We have a lot of reds. But then I noticed the date of latest available data with 2021, which I think you just also referred to. So I guess my challenge on that is this worthwhile? If you've got such old data, is that something, if we're thinking about how we guide the board to make decisions, can we realistically make decisions based upon those red items because normally you would want to correct them, wouldn't you? But if the data's 2021, in 2 years, it could have improved massively.
Thank you for that comment. Indeed, that is the dichotomy that whether to have the data that's available, but it's out of date, or whether that's helpful. We've absolutely had this in our purview and have tried to obtain data that is most recent, that is relevant to what we're trying to measure, and we'll keep improving this. But I take on board. It may, if the feedback is that if data is so out of date it's not helpful to the committee, that's certainly something we can take on board.
And just coming back on another point that you made, where, hang on, I've just lost my train of thought there. Yes, where we're measuring our points around what the average, same as house building, I think you referred to, where our own metrics are falling behind, but then we're ahead of the national average. Should we be read under those circumstances, or should we be more lenient with ourselves in terms of our performance? I think that if we're not careful, is that we potentially are going to look worse than we actually are. So maybe either A, adding in an extra metric, or B, perhaps being a bit kinder to ourselves and actually just using the metric against the national average would be perhaps better.
Councillor Smart.
Thanks, Chair. So thanks for the report, Jules. You asked us to give you feedback on the national averages bit of your report. So, I mean, I think generally, in my experience, it's better to have comparable type of things like authorities or whatever to compare against, as opposed to a national average. Go to European average or world average. I mean, the smaller the pool that you compare with of comparable like things, the better. But maybe you haven't got similar authorities to compare against. I don't know, but that would be my comment on that.
Did you want to come back on that, Jules?
Thank you. That's I understand that point, and we'll take a look to see whether we can get that look across at comparable authorities.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, thank you for the report. In Appendix 4 on the complex programme bus reform programme down as green. How confident are you that that's the correct rating for it? Because it's not really what I'm picking up out on the street, that the bus reform programme is green.
Certainly. So this report has been put together from a combination of data sources relevant to the timing of the programme and the success of the programme. And I'm able to present that information to you today, but I could equally go back to the team and ask them to have another look at that indicator to check the green rating.
Councillor Goldsack.
Apologies. Jules, yeah, thanks very much for a very complex report. You just raised a point there, and I thought I'd have to come back and ask, what is a comparable authority to this one that you could compare it with? Because I wouldn't know one.
So the methodology that's often used is similar size authority. I'm familiar from my work in the county council, where we looked across it. For example, Oxfordshire was sometimes used as a comparator. So I think it just depends on the measure that you're looking at and working out what would be a good comparator and explaining why you've chosen that authority to look across at.
Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Chair. Jules, thanks ever so much. I've got two questions, if I may. If I go to the simpler one first, I think, which is, again, back to the complex programmes and the net zero programme. Now, we know from our previous experience that in the southeast it was very difficult to get sufficient contractors to provide the insulation services, and of course we lost a fair bit of money in the region because that couldn't be delivered. And I see it's at amber now. Has the contractor situation changed dramatically, or are we still looking at this really difficult problem about having enough people to fit these sort of ameliorations to bring net zero closer?
Just bear with me one moment, I will go to that metric. While I'm scrolling through, could you give me the metric number, please?
I'm just going by the Appendix C, and I'm on page, let me see, the third page. It's just before the bus reform programme at Green.
I think it's metric 10, isn't it?
I think it's metric 10, yes.
Oh, that's very helpful.
Sorry, I beg your pardon.
Okay, thank you. So I don't have the detail of that analysis to hand. I am aware that the team have been working closely with national government to agree the right rating for that metric, which indeed has had problems, and that we have had approval at that high level to change the rating to what it is now.
Thank you. If I may come to my second question, it's a more general one, really. From the report, we have a lovely triangle hierarchy, lists corporate, operational, and individual, and then the suggestion of the structure is that we, as members, will get the corporate and thematic performance reporting. How do we know that each individual in the combined authority is working effectively? I guess we're going to get some form of reporting, and equally that operational projects are being met. We see a lot of that. But I'm just interested to know how the regular reporting that we receive from you will indicate not just we're meeting corporate responsibilities, that the teams are working well and that the projects are working well. Just some, because you said that you're going to report again in November and January. How are you doing that? My concern is we get a huge amount of information and we may not be able to concentrate on specific areas.
Thank you for that question. I think at the moment, the KPI around project performance, project management performance, is very useful in looking at teams and projects. I'm not sure that we have something that effectively tells you about individuals at the moment. We are rolling out what we're calling the LEAP program of individual objectives and appraisals, and I'll take that back to the HR team, see whether we can work out something for you.
Thanks. And just finally, there's a differentiation, of course, between this committee looking at how things are working and audit and governance, which is, are the structures in place and are correct and so on. And we don't really want to cross over into each area. But are you confident that you have the structures in place now that you'll be able to deliver operational and corporate information to us of suitable granularity that we can actually challenge you on them if we need to?
So I'd like to answer that question in terms of the policy and then in terms of the capacity, which is a different answer for the two. We have good confidence in the performance management framework and its ability to guide us as we build our performance management system. We don't currently have the capacity that we will need. So we are reviewing internal capacity in the area of the Chief Executive's office and in the area of the PMO. And we will be bringing forward proposals to look at full implementation of the framework and what that needs.
So more staff, in effect, is going to be required?
It might be, but I don't know for sure.
Thanks very much indeed. Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments or questions? So we're asked to note the framework, scrutinise the aspects within it, note the progress to evaluate the impact of the devolution deal, and review and comment on the relevance of the performance information. So are we happy to note the performance management framework and the progress to evaluate? Yep. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jules. Thank you. Hello, Angela. So we're now moving on to the improvement framework with a specific focus on project plans and delivery. And welcome, Angela, to deliver the report.
Chair, thank you for that, and good morning. Good morning, all. Please bear with me. I've got a bit of a cough, so if I have to resort to drinking water, please forgive me. So yes, Chair, I will give a brief introduction over the where we're at with the improvement programme, and then I'll pass across to Steve Cox, who will lead the deep dive. So first of all, Chair, may I just note or share with you that in the recommendations, it asks you to note the progress for June. This is an error. It is July and August. So I'd ask that that is noted first of all, just so that you are noting the right period of update. And Chair, the progress report in July and August is to set out progress made against the key concerns that were set out by both the external auditor and the best value notice. And that is the focus, the specific focus for the improvement programme. Chair, I'll briefly take the committee through the key progress against the overall programme, and then I've said I'll pass across to Steve. So in the report, in paragraph 2.3, it sets out the overall progress against the overall improvement plan. And as you will see, the overall progress is rated as green at the end of August. The improvement group, which is chaired by the Executive Director for Resources and Performance, continues to assess progress, and it's done in a very structured way against the highlight report, which is appended to the report, to ensure that we're using the RAG ratings that have been agreed, and also to ensure that any risks, mitigations or other elements are considered through the governance of the overall improvement programme. And Chair, I'll just take you through the committee through a few of the highlights from the progress that's been made. But as I say, the highlight report gives the full detail. So in terms of governance and decision making, in paragraph 2.4, that is rated as green. And there are some key examples there of the progress that has been made. So the procurement code was approved by Audit and Governance Committee. The officer and member protocols were agreed. Progress is being made on the support that you as a committee are looking for, and I understand that a report is coming back here in November with some specific recommendations. The constitutional changes have been agreed, and the new constitution is now uploaded on the combined authorities website. Chair, moving to procurement, which is in paragraph 2.5, the revised procurement strategy, policy, procedure and code have now been agreed, and the operating model for the procurement function has been agreed and signed off. In terms of project plans and delivery, which is rated as green amber in paragraph 2.6, Chair, I will leave that for Steve to cover in a few minutes. With regards to partnership working in paragraph 2.7, that is currently rated as green amber. And Chair, significant progress has been made in addressing identified concerns. There is now in place stronger and more collegiate partnership working, and that is reported across constituent councils. And there are some examples there of where that has been observed in the proposed refresh of the sphere and the future, the shaping the future vision. So that is positive and has been reflected in the chair of the IIB's note that I understand has been circulated to committee members. In terms of the theme on confidence, culture and capacity in paragraph 2.8, again, progress has been made and it is rated as green. The new approach to corporate performance reporting is on the agenda today, as you have just heard, and will also be connected and linked with the update that Steve and colleagues will give. Progress is being made on member development sessions, and planning is in place for the CA Board Development Programme that is due to commence in October of this year. The values and behaviour, the work with staff on the values that have been developed, and also going back to staff, sharing with them on key things that they have raised from the last staff survey. The next and fourth staff conference is due to take place in October. And Chair, it's also I'm keen to point out that several important HR policies have now been approved by the HR committee. So that is positive, and they are set down in the report. In terms of the improvement board engagement, and this is a key element of improvement that was set out in the best value notice, the improvement board continues to meet formally. As I shared, the note from the chair has been circulated and it acknowledges the progress that has been made and sets out some further areas for focus. The CA board attended, again, the IIB meeting on the 11th of September to discuss deeper devolution, and again acknowledged by the IIB chair as being a very positive and collegiate session. The new IIB chair is meeting with key stakeholders, and I understand, Chair, he has also met with yourself. In terms of the conclusion of the investigations and safeguarding of staff, indications are that progress will be made over September and October, and the conclusion being reached by the end of this calendar year. So, Chair, that is an overview of progress against the improvement plan that was agreed by the CA board in May. And Chair, I'll now pass across to Steve, who will take members through the deep dive.
Thanks, Angela. Good morning, members. I'll briefly introduce the deep dive into the project plans and delivery workstream. I chair the internal working group as a member of CMT. The work that has been done, you've already heard from Jules around the performance management framework. The other two parts to this, the single assurance framework and the risk management framework, colleagues have joined us to help with the presentation and answer any questions that you might have coming from this. So I think the important point to make is that these all three together as a package are really crucial underpinnings for any organisation, and important that the progress that we've been made is being considered today and will be considered by the board on Wednesday, the Combined Authority Board on Wednesday. The details are in Appendix 2 of the paper on, I think it's page 101 of the pack. And briefly, before I ask either Chris Bolton or Jodie Townsend to say anything further, the single assurance framework, in summary, sets out the systems, the processes, the protocols that we want to make sure enable a consistent approach to appraisal, to assurance, risk and performance through the life cycle of our programs and projects. So really important to get in place. The second part around performance management framework you've already heard about this morning, and the third, risk management, is to make sure we are consistent with the guidance in the Orange Book. As Angela said, the rating that we've given this is green amber. The main reason for that is that we haven't got approval to it yet, and we hope to get that on Wednesday, and comments today from this committee will be really helpful in inputting to the discussion, I'm sure, on Wednesday. The final thing from me is to say that we've been through all three elements of this, been working very closely with partners, colleagues in local authorities and other partners across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, using their advice, expertise and input to shaping what I think are three really important, hopefully, documents that you will find important and recognise the importance of for the combined authority going forward. Chair, I'll leave it there. May want to invite Jodie Townsend, I think is online for the single assurance framework, and my colleague Chris Bolton is here to cover the risk management framework.
Thank you. Do you suggest we start with Jodie or Chris?
I would suggest Jodie. I think the single assurance framework is something that is really important, but I know Jodie is happy to say a few words.
Okay, Jodie?
Good morning, committee. I hope you'll hear me nicely and clearly. So I'm going to the first framework, and I have one of the frameworks of mine. We're going this week we'll look to Steve said it's actually new framework approved. Happy to answer any questions or queries from the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. Nice to see you again. A lot of the information around the risk management framework has been covered. So Steve's mentioned it. Jodie's mentioned it, particularly as the risk management framework is part of the SAF. But if I give you a quick sort of run through the framework, it's the combined authority's approach to looking at risk. That's the important thing. Now, the risk management wasn't in a great place. When I started last year, we've made some good strides, and I'd like to tell you about that. And all the work that we've been doing has been put into this framework. The framework hasn't been updated for 3 years, so it had, it was very timely that we get around to doing it now. The framework itself there's a number of parts to it. There's obviously governance, making sure that people understand what they're supposed to be doing, so information around their roles and responsibilities, at all levels, from a corporate level through to a service level, program level, and down to project level. All the projects, once they move into delivery, they have risk registers, the same ones, the same template. One of the things we really want to get to as well is a risk culture where people understand risk, and they don't feel, well, they rather they feel empowered to be able to raise any issues that are coming up. Now, I'm not sure that was the case previously in the past. Some new additions to the framework is a corporate risk appetite. We didn't have one of those for the organisation, so we had an exercise with CMT, I think it was back in April, and now we have the risk appetite across all the services. So you'll expect things like finance, for example, is quite cautious with risk. Obviously, to do with the budgets, we need the budgets to be able to deliver what we're being asked to do. But we have that, and we've incorporated that in the framework. Now, just to give an example of how that works with the risk appetite and the sort of statement of definitions that go alongside them, they have maximum scores. So if, for example, someone starts with a new project or something changes in a project, they look at those scores, and if it's above the maximum that it should be, according to the risk appetite, whether it's cautious, for example, then that's a sign to the project manager, program manager, director to escalate that risk up to be it program or corporate level. I mentioned earlier around reporting. So Jules was talking about the performance reporting. Risk reporting, we report every month. We have an internal performance and risk meeting. That's with the ED for resources and performance. And again, risks are looked at every month, a corporate management team as well as reporting into, corporate reporting into board quarterly, into A&G as well, every 2 months that they've asked that for as well. The important thing around the risk management framework as well is that previously we didn't really learn any lessons. No one actually wrote down when something had worked really well, or equally when it hadn't worked. And now that's changed. Now we have a lessons learned register as well. And we have a bit of software where we collect all the information when any project closes. So we sit down and we work through what's happened there. Before I finish, a couple of things around risk management training. As I mentioned there, it wasn't front and centre maybe a year or 18 months ago. We've run 2 sessions for the Audit and Governance Committee around risk. We've run risk management training for combined authority program and project managers, including those for the subsidiary companies. We're running training sessions with the constituent council's nominated officers. I know Jodie mentioned earlier about the external working group. So again, there we're running training for that group as well. And lastly, to try and embed the work that we're doing with risk, we've got some new risk software. So this is sort of best practice risk software where all the risk registers at corporate level and at service level are recorded in this software. Now, previously, it's a spreadsheet that each individual area or individual service would need to fill in. So there's a lot of labour. It's quite labour intensive getting to the risk information. With this implementation that's going to be happening over the next couple of months, it should make it much easier for project and program managers to be recording their risk, but equally make it much more open, transparent, and everyone can see right across the board if there's any risks that need looking at. Okay, Happy to take any questions. Maybe start with Jodie and the Sept.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Angela, Steve, Jodie and Chris for the summaries of what's in the report. Questions, comments? Councillor Smart.
So thanks for the report. So Angela, so we're trying to work out what you said about June being July and August. So am I right in presuming that recommendation A, which is the same in 18th of September papers as 24th of July papers, is correct? Although I don't understand why we need to do a recommendation again. And in those same two sets of papers, purpose 1.1 in July is the same as 1.1 today, but should be reading July and August today, not June. Is that correct?
Chair, yes, it should for both the recommendation and the purpose 1.1, it should read July and August, not June. And I apologise for that.
Yeah, thanks. I apology accepted by me as well. I mean, I'm dyslexic, I'm always writing the wrong things. But isn't it the case in recommendation A that June is correct? Because that's when it's saying that it was identified by the external auditor in June 22. So it wouldn't be a different date, would it? It's the same date. So that's correct. But my question there is, why are we doing the same recommendation again?
Apologies, Chair, I've just rewritten. It's no excuse that I've not been feeling very well, but please bear with me. The committee is correct that the progress is for the identified by the external auditor in June, but the purpose was incorrect. That the date, the update was for the period July and August. So apologies for that.
Thank you. And any other comments or questions? Councillor Hassel and then Councillor Coles.
Not sure we're going in the right order, but a question for Chris anyway. So I'd just like to say, yeah, thank you. I really appreciated the update and that we're making progress on the risk management framework. I was just wondering, and apologies if this information has already been provided. We have many pages of information of data provided with us, but on the risk appetite and the risk inventory, is it possible for you to share that information with us? And the other question, which is the second question, on the risk inventory, I've noticed in local government is there's a tendency to have a service risk inventory and a corporate risk inventory. And I guess my view of risk management is it doesn't really matter whether it's a service risk or it's a corporate risk, it's still a risk. So I guess when we're looking at risks, I'd just like to know what the top 10 risks are that are affecting the combined authority, irrespective of whether it happens to be corporate or service. Because sometimes I find that the corporate risks are shared, whereas the service risks aren't. And I really want to know whether our IT is completely falling over. Or not. So sorry, I'm wittering a little bit, but I'll stop.
You're not at all. Risk appetite, yeah, happy to share. It's actually in the risk management framework. So there's a section in there, sort of by area, that you can have a look at and go into a bit more detail. Obviously, if you have any questions, sort of further questions about that, more than happy to come back to you. Also, while I remember, we have Richard Mackey from RSM, so our risk experts on the line as well. So if there's any extra sort of detail you might need, Richard should be able to help you there. You're absolutely right about the risk sort of inventory thing and that corporate and service piece. Now, we have progressed the corporate register in the last year, so I'd say it's in shape now, and it's being looked at in all the right areas. Now, at a service level, That's not the case. Now, that's not to say they don't exist. They do, but there's gaps. Now, I've been looking at them as part of the implementation of the software in preparation for that rolling out the next couple of months. And although they're not terrible by any means, and risks are being covered, but they're not correct. They're not being fully sort of filled in correctly. So some of the fields are missing. We might have some risk owners that are missing. Some of the scores that you're not quite sure about. So as part of the exercise over the next couple of months, we're going to be going into a lot more detail with each of the services, making sure that those risk registers are implemented on the software, so correct templates, and equally all the risk owners, program project managers, they will get the appropriate training in how to use the system as well. So we're trying to go much deeper. So previously it was all a bit arm's length. We knew at the corporate level we were looking at things, but at a service level we weren't sure. Now we're finding out, and we want to make sure that it is as correct as it can be, as you mentioned.
So is there any reassurance from that statement, because I've come across this before, that we don't have some horrendous, I don't know, cyber risk or something really, really big on the service side that, by focusing on the corporate risk, and I appreciate it's often more difficult to get the operational, the service side thing bang on, but it tends to be the bit that causes organizations to fall over. If you take like Birmingham as an example, would a risk around equal pay, would that be in the service risk or the corporate risk?
Well, obviously I don't know the detail about Birmingham, but you'd expect that to be at the corporate level.
Yeah, okay. So I guess my thing is there anything that we might find in the service that could really come back and bite us that we're not aware of and that we're potentially not working on?
Not in my opinion at the moment. So reviewing them the last month or so, there's information in there. Some of the ones that are in there we talked about Birmingham and future funding, for example, they're in the corporate risk register already. And remember, we have those monthly meetings, not only at corporate level at CMT, but the PMO will meet with the project and program managers and the finance reps, and they'll agree, and they'll check the risks and make sure that they're all happy with it. So we're trying to cover as many bases as possible. But the best solution will be once we get the software and be able to roll that out, so we know that we're capturing everything.
Councillor Coles.
Thank you very much. I think my question's for Jody, because he mentioned the English Accountability Devolution Framework. We're talking about really complex processes. It can be quite confusing, and to try to articulate it in a way that is, well, accountable to the public, let me put it that way, is going to be a challenge. So I was just wondering, I guess it's Jody to ask, but it does cover corporate priorities, it covers projects, it also covers risk as well, but how that can be articulated so that a resident can see that it is transparent.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. So you're right, at this moment in time, everything that's being presented is quite technical, and that is deliberate to make sure that we are presenting the information that government requires us to present so we can get that clearance. What will go alongside all of this once that clearance has been given and we can then start to plan out the implementation of the assurance framework is guidance. There will be a development of a new section of the website that is going to be written in plain English so that any area of the region, whether that be the voluntary sector, community groups, constituent authorities, key partners, can access that element of the website, and they can propose ideas for projects and programs, and there will be further guidance on there as well for how they can go about doing that, what the process is, and what kind of information they need to submit. All the guidance is going to be picked up alongside this, again, is going to be written for specific audiences. There's going to be public guidance, there is going to be member-specific guidance, and there's going to be officer-specific guidance. That's quite a big task. It's all in the project plan for the SAF, and it's important that we obviously get that right so everyone understands what they need to do when they need to do it. As well as that guidance, there is a reworking of the PMO, which is being led by Chris. The PMO will become much more of an enabling team that will be supporting the application of the assurance framework. So they will be there as a constant guider throughout the entire process. We have had some conversations as well with our comms team about how can we go about getting people to understand the assurance framework. We've tried tackling that initially with our officer call within the combined authority. We've created a short video, hopefully again in plain English, to say what is an assurance framework and what is it supposed to do. Perhaps that again is something we can pick up and look to spread more widely and also include upon our website. But it's going to be the guidance is going to be the key element. Without that, I think a lot of people will fail to understand the requirements, as this is a framework, so it doesn't actually include all the detail you need to go through each steps. I would just add to that as well. We have specifically developed the steps within the assurance framework to be as simple as we possibly can. We've tested those with the partner working group of constituent council officers and our internal officer group to make sure they're easy to understand. And the whole process, as I should also say, is proportionate. So obviously, the lower the level of value or complexity, the far easier it is to develop a project and get that project approved. And obviously, the higher you go in technical nature and level of approval level in terms of financial commitment, the larger the proportionality is applied, and there's more requirement needed to give that assurance to the combined authority and to government that that project will hopefully be delivered and realise its intended benefits.
Thanks, Julie. I'm just trying to, in plain speaking, if I'm a resident, I live in a particular area and I want to know what the combined authority has done for me in my area, can I ask that question of the system? And it will tell me, yes, in your area, we've done this with the bus network, we've done this with the local education, and all that sort of question.
I mean, Chris may want to come in on this, but that's the intent. The intent is to get to the point where we can give that regional view, where we can give access to what is being developed, what is in production, what is now in delivery, and what the outcomes of that are. This is why it's so key to link these three frameworks together. Obviously, the single assurance framework needs a key relationship to, for example, to the performance management framework and performance data that it's reporting. But Chris, you may want to add to that.
I just want to sort of go back to some of Jules' earlier point. I mean, you've seen the balance scorecard, you've seen the sort of corporate KPIs reporting the most complex projects. Now, all that information comes from our highlight reports. So each month, we will check with each of the sort of programs and project managers, and they will deliver their report as to how they're progressing with their projects. Now, what we also have that we haven't published yet is we have a performance dashboard, in other words, a piece of software where we can report online. Now, we're thinking about how we're going to do that. Now, we've had some initial discussions. For example, I know Tim's here for an item in a moment, but we were talking for transport, for example, last week. How can we report upon your project? So how can we put something on the website that's easily accessible for the public so they can go on it, press a button? Now, we need to work through how we're going to do that. Now, there's a couple of things that have come up already. Some of the information might be commercially confidential. So we need to be wary of that. Equally, we need to make sure that the information that we're putting up there is relevant, is timely. It's like, we talked about earlier, some reports going back a couple of years. Is there any value in those? I'm not sure. So we need to work through those. And equally, we need to understand how we're going to answer any questions that come through. So the public go online, they have a look, and with the software, you can break it down by area. You can look at all the projects in that area by constituent council and so on, by service. It might be transport, it might be business, and so on. So it's a good tool. We've had some initial feedback saying that people really like it. There's a number of issues we need to work through before we can publish that. But it's not been forgotten. We're not trying to not publish the information. As part of the EDAF stuff is about being open and transparent. So we want to do that, but there's a couple of hurdles we need to get through first, or get over first, rather.
Councillor Smart.
Yeah, so let's pick it up on something there. So Jody said that hopefully something will be in plain English. So just to pick up on that, I presume it will be in plain English, not hopefully. And also plain English with small letters is just a thing, but there is an organisation called the Plain English Campaign, which I've spoken about at Cambridge City Council, and I'm very keen on organisations writing things in plain English and speaking in plain English so that residents understand. So, you know, just to take that a bit further, is this authority, because I don't know, a part of the Plain English Campaign? Does it have accreditation? Is it a member, a corporate member? It should be, I think.
Who wants to take that?
I can start if that's of help. I can't comment on whether the CA is a member of the Plain English campaign or accreditation. Hopefully someone else in the room can. But we absolutely intend to write the guidance meeting the plain English standards. To give it's a difficult task with the assurance framework. As I said, it can be quite technical. And some other CAs have been through this process and met similar problems. But that's a good thing for us because we know what now works, has worked in other combined authority areas and what hasn't. So, for example, the West Midlands has put considerable resource into a number of frequently asked question guides for each element within their assurance framework process. And they found that that has been the document most accessed by the public and by partners and stakeholders in trying to understand the assurance framework. We'll also be doing obviously a lot of training with our own PMO and our officer call, so they are fully adverse on all elements and can explain it in the simplest terms to anyone who needs to understand areas within the combined authority assurance framework process. One of the other reasons why we've had the partner working group and we've done a lot of the co-production with the constituent council officers is to make sure that those officers also fully understand the process, as they're going to be the ones who are coming across submitting business cases and going through the process on a most regular basis. So they're also in a position where they can obviously brief their own members within their constituent authorities and hopefully the wider public as well on how the process operates.
Yes.
Yeah, if I could just come back, we'll take that question away on the plain English question. It's a really important one and one we'll come back to the committee on. The only point to add to what Jodie said is it's really important that what we're talking through in terms of prioritisation processes is very visual. So there's a flow chart within the assurance framework which shows the stages, the gateway decision-making processes that we're going to go through and why we have them. So I think, as well as the guidance, which is obviously crucial, being able to see what we're planning to do in terms of prioritisation, I think is really important as well. So to make sure there is strategic fit, to understand, what the rationale for a project is, that it's meeting the criteria that we're setting out in a very obvious and a very visual way. So alongside the written guidance in plain English, there's also a visual representation.
Yeah, thanks for letting me come back, Chair. So, I mean, not to labour the point, but I will. Plain English is really important. And if it's, I presume because I've not had an answer that we're not part of the campaign, because I think someone would have known if we are, and we should be. And, if it's not written or spoken in plain English to us and to residents, then it can't be understood necessarily, and so it's not transparent. And we talk about things being transparent, but it won't be transparent. It'll be translucent at best. And we need to be communicating with people around us. We need to make sure that everyone understands us. And it's lazy writing and speaking to communicate in a way that people don't understand what you're saying. I've coached sports teams before now, and if I don't tell people what to do, they do the wrong thing, and that's my fault. So it's our fault if we don't communicate correctly with the people around us.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Hassel?
And just a very quick one for Chris, really, is that possibly my incompetence, but I've just been through the agenda and followed every single link that I possibly can, and I can't. Although the risk management framework et al. Is viewed as being an appendix, there is no link to it unless someone else has managed to. Yeah, so it's not in these papers. So I think we've said before that we want to have everything we need in the meeting. But if you could circulate those documents as discussed, that'd be great.
I certainly will.
Any other questions or comments? No? in which case we've got the recommendation to note the progress, and we know that we're looking at the progress against the improvements needed and recognised in June 22 and January 23, but we're looking at the progress made effectively to date, July and August. And consider the project plans. Well, we've been considering that as we've been discussing. So is everybody happy to note the progress? Yeah, thank you. So thank you very much, all four of you. That was very helpful. And now we move on to the bus network review. I think the report is going to be presented by Neil Byers, but we do also have Councillor Smith with us as well. I'm aware, Councillor Smith, you're only available till 12:30, so I don't know if you wanted to say something first.
I'm happy for Neil to lead in, and then I'll come in and supplement on anything else. I've managed to change a few things around. I may be able to stay a little longer, so there's not the same rush there.
Very much.
Thanks, Chair. I'll make a start then. Thank you. So the paper that we brought to you focuses on the work that we're doing around the bus network review, and it focuses on the appendix, which is included alongside your paper, which is being considered by the Transport and Is it poor reception or the volume? Is that okay? Yeah. So the paper in front of you focuses on a paper that's been considered last week by the Transport and Infrastructure Committee and this week by the Combined Authority Board, which is around the bus network review. So the bus network review is set in the context of a wider piece of work that we're looking at around bus reform, but focuses on the more immediate term activity of the existing tendered contracts that the Combined Authority currently funds. So following decisions in October in 2022, when there was significant withdrawal of bus services from Stagecoach, the Combined Authority stepped in to continue to support those services as best as it could, and at the same time took the decision to do a review of all tendered contracts to identify if they are meeting a community need and also if they're providing value for money. The work over the first part of this calendar year has been to establish the approach and undertake the assessment of all of those contracts. And now we're starting to present the initial recommendations of those services. So the paper that's provided to you in the appendix to the overviewing committee paper sets out those recommendations that have been considered by the Transport and Infrastructure Committee and will be by board this week. It's recommending that there's 51 of the services that we're currently funding which are performing well against the metrics of providing community need, which is about the number of people within a catchment of a bus network to places they need to get to, and also looks at the cost per passenger journey and cost per passenger journey per kilometre to establish value for money of those services. The paper sets out the position of each of the services across those metrics and then makes recommendations that 51 of those services should continue in their current form and 18 of those services should be further reviewed, and that 7 services still needed to be assessed. Those 18 services is about looking to find ways to improve them. So are they still meeting a community need? Have things changed around them that those services haven't responded to? Or are they not providing the kind of connectivity that is needed? The work that the Combined Authority will be doing over the next few months is engaging with leaders, with councillors and with community groups to identify opportunities to improve those services, and also if there are other services and gaps in the network which might be met. Alongside this, we're working with the bus operators for all of the contracted services and the commercial services to see if there are other improvements that can be made and to ensure that they understand the implications of the recommendations and future decisions. Engagement on the bus network review will continue. This shouldn't be seen as a one-off exercise. It'll be something we'll be looking to do with all of the contracts on an annual basis to ensure we continue to get value for money. And also recognise that while there are 51 that are currently performing well, we shouldn't assume that they will continue to perform well. And there's a role for the Combined Authority working with operators and communities to continue to promote and support those services. The paper also sets out considerations around demand responsive and the TING contract. So the paper sets out some of the recommendations and considerations for demand responsive in general terms as a way of serving communities within the combined authority area, particularly where there isn't a good service and those rural communities where a scheduled service might not be affordable or meet their needs. For the TING contract itself, that's the paper's recommending a short-term extension to give us the opportunity to bring that alongside the other scheduled services so that we can see both demand responsive and scheduled services together rather than treating them separately. The paper also sets out some of the initial recommendations and opportunities around the Bus Service Improvement Plan Plus funding, which government recently announced and will be available to the combined authority. Further work is needed on that, and recommendations will be brought back to the board in November for the 18 services and the Bus Service Improvement Plan Plus funding, so that the board can consider the options for those pieces of funding. We've also identified a number of other recommendations and lessons learned from undertaking the bus network review to help us develop good information and continue to engage bus services. I'll stop there and have to take any questions.
Before I go to questions, is there anything you wanted to add, Councillor Smith?
Right, just checking you can hear me. You've got good audibility.
Yes, we can hear well, thank you.
Marvellous. So there's really, I'll be very brief. First of all, I want to thank Neil and the team for the ongoing work on this. It's a really detailed piece of work and it's a really good piece of work. What I would want to highlight is that the approach we're taking here is so different to a purely commercial approach. And I really want to pay tribute for the team for ensuring that that's the model that we're going to take. What we're looking at here are identifying routes that need further investigation, looking to see what support we're able to put in place, looking to see what the best solution is for communities and working with communities. And I'm very encouraged about the way that this is modelling a far less commercial approach to buses. Clearly, we have to make prudent use of public funds, but what we're doing here is trying to come up with solutions that really work for the local communities that we seek to serve. So I want to thank the team for the work they're doing on that. And I know there's going to be a lot of work over the next few months in terms of community engagement. So I want to thank them in advance for that work.
Thank you. So members, comments, questions? Councillor Coles.
Chair, thanks very much, and thank you very much for the report. I'm sort of reflecting on the fact that we should be seeing much more active travel proposals coming out and people using their cars less frequently. And yet we're going to spend 3 years on just 4 areas for the DRT service. And I wonder, are we being ambitious enough? Are we being too slow here? Because I can imagine many people will say, well, actually, I could quite do with a DRT service in my own local area. Why have you only chosen these 4? And of those, some have had previous DRT style arrangements in place. So are you playing an easy number here, ones that have previously worked, and you're going to wait 3 years to evaluate before anything can be rolled out further? Can I just sort of give you that challenge about, can you move faster, quicker, and more widely across the region on the DRT?
I think probably part of the answer to that will be how we balance our funding constraints. So I think there's each of the DRT services, we're estimating about £300,000 per service to trial. I think it's a good challenge. I think it's the right challenge to be able to provide better connectivity to more communities. I think also balancing the opportunity of DRT around more traditional ways of delivering scheduled services as well. So I think it's the right challenge for us to take away and reflect on, and also bring back recommendations about how we might afford those opportunities and opportunities to go back and engage with government to help us deliver more bus services, because there is a big ambition to deliver more and better bus services. So I think it's the right challenge and one for us to take away and look at that. And look, DRT alongside scheduled services. Probably the last thing I would say about, not the last, well, the point I make around DRT is it can come in many forms as well. So it's not always a DRT in one place is not always the same as a DRT in another as well. There's a number of different ways, some more expensive, some more affordable. So I think there's a challenge for us as an authority, not just to take one model and assume that is the correct model, which is why we're looking at pilots rather than assuming we've got the right solution for demand responsive already.
Thanks ever so much, Neil. I think what I'd come back to say is we can't really wait very long because we're hoping that behaviour is going to change, and we're hoping that people will use these sort of services more and more, not just the DRT service, but the wider bus network. So have you factored in any sort of assumptions that behaviours are going to change anyway, or are you simply responding to current demand that you see?
So most of the work, so there's a combination. So when we look at, we're factoring new demand around new development. So the opportunities to, as new developments come in, design the network to encourage people to use public transport or active modes if that's the right solution in that location at that point of that development coming online. When we're looking at the current tendered network, a lot of that is about making best use of existing funding around the existing network to ensure that people have connections in order to get to essential services. There's a challenge around the funding available to deliver a basic network, and also meet your challenge of making it a more attractive service to drive that demand up.
Thanks very much, Chair.
Councillor Davis?
Apologies, I can't hear if somebody's...
Did you hear
Chair,
me?
we heard none of that.
Right, okay, I'll start again. I was pleased to hear both of you mention that there will be more community involvement as we move forward, because there certainly wasn't that community involvement when people didn't know till the 11th hour whether they had a bus to take them to work the next day. And that's it's probably one of the 7 routes that you're talking about. I mean, my phone was hot with people, and I feel there could have been some communication. People were aware that this was taking place and asking questions. Then there could have been information on the website, or you could have put something out on social media, but there was nothing. So I think in future, if this sort of thing happens again, we must try to keep the public informed.
Could I come in briefly on that? I'm sure Neil may have a kind of more technical response, but I think one of the things we do need to remember here is, as it currently stands, we are not a franchise network, and we are reliant broadly on the communication from bus operators. So I absolutely agree that I think we can all, as a whole team, that's our combined authority team, and us putting pressure on bus operators and then working with us, ensure that we get information out quicker on changes like this. And I know that there are things in place to help that happen. It's something we're really aware of.
If I can, I'll just add to that response, if that's okay. Just to say that operators can continue to kind of to work as they do, and we have the constraints of, if an operator decides to make a change on a commercial service, we communicate as soon as we're able to on that. We need to go through a contracting process which limits our ability to communicate early. I think what we're trying to do with the bus network review is when we're in control of the contract and the timing, that we provide information as soon as we can. So some of the recommendations and decisions at this stage to get to November puts us in a good place to communicate by March, April next calendar year. So it's looking to demonstrate we are giving more time to communicate with communities compared to what happens at the moment when commercial operators make changes.
Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks both for the report. It's obviously encouraging to see that so many are being supported. You've referred to working with communities. Just wondered if you could expand on what consultation you carried out sort of locally on any changes that were wanted on supported routes. If I could give you a very specific example, I represent Burwell in East Cambs. We have a supported route from Newmarket through to Cambridge. But it used to go through Bottisham, and now it bypasses Bottisham. And I know people wanted it to stop at Bottisham, but did you undertake any consultation with those people before you agreed to just extend the current route?
I think you'll have to allow me to come back to you on that one. I wasn't with the organisation at the time that decision was taken, so I don't know the specific detail of that change. The approach we're looking to take is through leaders, through the Transport and Infrastructure Committee members, and through yourselves and other colleagues, to make sure we can have conversations with the right organisations. So through parish councils, if that's the appropriate group, there are a number of either bus or other transport related action groups in the combined authority area who we're speaking to through this process. So we very much look to get support in that engagement, so we can speak to the right community groups who might be contacting yourself and other councillors as well. So we very much look to kind of work with you and others to make sure we speak to the right people through this process, and we'll be actively engaging over the next few weeks and months.
Could I just, this is the problem of not sitting in the room, Tim, Neil, could I ask you, when you're looking in that, also to check whether that was an operator decision or whether that was, I think that was a commercial route. I wouldn't like to be 100% certain on that, but that's worth feeding back in terms of that decision-making process as well.
Councillor Atkins.
There we are. Thank you, Chair. My concerns the 7 routes which were not yet assessed when this paper was written. Can you please explain why the routes had not been assessed and when they are, and when we're likely to have that assessment? I'm focusing on this partly because one of those 7 routes happens to be the bus, quote unquote, for a number of the villages that I represent, and obviously there's, in some ways, it's the worst of all worlds, not knowing, to have it kind of hanging around without any resolution. I imagine the experience is shared across the other 6 routes as well. So I'd appreciate an update on that, please.
Yes, so this relates to provision of information by the operators on their passenger numbers. In order for us to complete that, we've since had information on the City 4, and we're looking to get the rest of the information from those operators. Our ability to enforce the requirement to provide information is limited through our contracts with operators. So we're also looking at, through this process, at how we can update and improve our contracts to ensure we get the information, especially as we are paying for those services. So and in terms of the timing, we'll look to bring back those recommendations as part of the paper which is planned for November. If some of those services fall into the category of review, which I think is probably linked to your concern, then we do have until the start of the next calendar year to do further consultation and engagement. So we still have time, if there are concerns around any of those services, to effectively give them the same opportunity and the same treatment for review as those that are being considered at the moment.
Thank you. Since you mentioned the City 4, if you wanted to provide an immediate update or an update by email, I'd obviously very much appreciate that. My concern is slightly, though, that it's difficult to assess your plans for the whole network where we've got these gaps. So, for instance, the City 4 serves an area which one end of it, Camborne, is in the existing DRT pilot, and the rest of it lies to the south of the new DRT pilot. So, if, for instance, you decide, there was a concern around the City 4, you might want to feed that into your decisions around DRT, given that you're suggesting pilots kind of in all directions around that area. And it would be a shame if, we withdrew a service in a particular area and just because of timings, it wasn't considered for an opportunity, perhaps to Councillor Cole's point, for a more ambitious DRT solution in that area. So I just wonder if you can just reflect perhaps on the
the issues that timing lag presents, and how we think about the network as a whole.
Can I maybe kick off on this? There are a couple of things that we need to bear in mind as we go through this. So we discussed this one, as you'd imagine, at length at TIC. And one of the issues here is this really, in effect, represents two stages in what potentially could be a much bigger process in reviewing the network. And that much bigger process, of course, will be contingent on any decisions made around bus reform. And one of the reasons that we want to see a reformed network is so that we do have, as a combined authority, greater strategic control over that network. So at the moment, we are significantly constrained in many ways by the nature of the system. The short timescales that we have sometimes to know that changes are being made by commercial operators, the constraints we have on when we're able to even tell residents that we're aware of those changes. There are legal constraints that are placed on us there. I would actually absolutely agree that it's very difficult when we're trying to look at reviewing routes and we're not getting that information in a timely manner from the networks. So I know that our officers will be able to work our review around when we get that information. I'm very encouraged as lead for transport to know that that is coming, and obviously we'll work closely with the officers if we need to put any political pressure on operators to provide the information that we need to ensure that the routes that we are currently directly subsidising, and of course there's subsidy across the network in other ways, but that direct subsidy, to ensure that we have the information we need to get those routes assessed properly.
I'll just add to that briefly as well. I would say that the approach we're taking is look to providing information and metrics, but there are also more strategic decisions, which links to the point made about how does this fit together as an overall network. And I think that links to the other point around this not being a one-off exercise. So there might be a more strategic decision to retain a service which is not performing too well because we know something might be coming later. And those are the types of information that we can present alongside the more metric-based assessments, so that we take a more rounded decision rather than just looking at the numbers and making a decision on that basis. So we'll look to bring together those kind of more strategic pieces of information alongside the numbers, so that when leaders are taking decisions, they have a view across how does the network perform overall, and what are those opportunities that might be coming later. Because I think consistency and behaviour are really important in terms of seeing people use buses in the long term, and providing that stability will ensure that people see confidence in the bus network, which we know is something we've struggled with as we've come out from the disruption we've had.
Councillor Hayes.
Sorry about that, took some time. Thank you, Jodie. Time ago, you mentioned that the bus reform was dependent on available funding. If I remember rightly, the Mayor introduced a £12 levy on every household, specifically to help pay for bus reform. I also understand that within Cambridgeshire, it was proposed to have a congestion charge, and one of the main parties who previously backed that have now gone back and said they're no longer supporting that, and that the that the congestion charge is likely that it will not go ahead. Where does that leave the combined authority in funding? Because we were told that some of that congestion charge would be used for public transport.
It may be that we need some other officers to the table to support Neil on this one, because I'm very aware this was not his paper. But if I could just reflect, so I was chairing the board when the precept was introduced in the January budget. As I said, as we all said at the time, nobody ever wants to put anything on a council tax, but there are necessities. I'm aware, for example, that our colleagues, you're in Peterborough at the moment, I'm aware our colleagues in Peterborough have had to look at doing quite significant use of their precepts over this particular period. The precept in January was designed, it gets in roughly, I think it's 3.8 million, it might be 3.6 per £1 on a band D each month. That was there specifically to fund 25 bus routes. These were 18 routes that Stagecoach had initially planned to act entirely, and another 5 routes, or it's 23 in total, not 25, another 5 routes that Stagecoach had wanted to partially get rid of. And in the autumn of last year, the Combined Authority Board agreed an emergency funding package to keep those buses going. But what we needed to do in the January was to agree a funding package for that set of routes to allow those routes to continue further. And that precept was specifically for those routes. We're just beginning the budget setting process for the year ahead. I imagine this could become a whole item by itself, so I'm anxious not to kind of set hairs running. But I think the key bit is if we're to sustain critical services, you're absolutely right. We must look at all funding mechanisms. We will do that. We'll do that in a responsible and measured way. And I'm sure there will be further discussions on that as we go through the budget setting process.
Steve, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to come back to that specific question, the Combined Authority's responsibilities for passenger transport and services, there's an expectation or requirement from government that we change what we have from now to either an enhanced partnership with operators or franchising, one of the two. To inform that decision, we have to go through the outline business case process. I know it's not an item we're talking about now, but it is important, I think, because the question's been put. That outline business case is in a draft form. It'll go to board later this week for a decision to simply audit that business case and to tell us whether we've got it right or not in its compliance with legislation. That process will run for the rest of the calendar year, and then a decision will be brought back to the board, probably in January, on what to do next. And that could be an enhanced partnership, it could be franchising, it could be a model of franchising we haven't thought of at the moment. So we need that process to run. At that point, when we come back to the board, we need to be clear about what we can afford. And we'll know at that point what we can afford has to be linked to the recommendation that we make to the board at that point. So what we fund isn't a question that we're seeking a decision on at this point.
Councillor Griffin. No, sorry. Yeah, Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you. I've been called many things. Thank you very much. I apologise. From the dialogue that we've got here, I just want to be absolutely sure that I'm on top of what we're looking at here. So what we're looking at is a renewal of the bus services that were in place as a result of the change of tack of Stagecoach that left us with a depleted network. We did the best we possibly could to get it back to where we wanted it to be, but that's what we're renewing today. From which we've heard through Councillor Brown how some local areas are not getting the local service that maybe they would want in terms of Bottisham. I would actually say further, there's a whole swathe of geographic areas in Cambridgeshire, my village being one of them, that don't even get a bus and aren't being reviewed yet. You know, so I understand. Now, my question is two-part. So the villages that aren't getting buses, are we to raise questions on their behalves to do with the actual BSIP, as opposed to what we're doing, what's coming before the board this week? If not, what do we do? The second part of it is a number of electronic, and I've read the report, but a number of electronic buses were provided to Stagecoach, despite the way they treated us last year or the year before, but they got the electronic buses. They will never go out to smaller market towns like Littleport or Soham or Chatteris or March or places like that. And I'm just saying, when you look at the drive for environmental thing here, it's all about, well, the more people get on buses, the less single journeys there are. With the greatest respect, we've heard nothing about how we're going to educate the users to get out of a car and onto a bus. I live in Isleham. I did a please tell me the buses from Isleham to Ely, which is the main market town. It's a 2 hour, 24-minute journey and 2 bus changes. Okay, it'll cost you £2.80 if you drive it. When are we really going to give those choices? You know, I'm just not seeing it. So if the 2 questions, one is on the environmental side and what's being done about the more rural environmental improvements, both in getting more people on the buses and getting better quality of bus. The second one is getting a bus full stop. How do we fight for those places that aren't served by the current bus route?
So, Councillor
I'll take
Smith?
first stab in at that. So we brought 2 papers to Transport and Infrastructure Committee. So the one that the committee has in front of them at the moment is the initial network review paper. That's very specifically about, well, broadly about looking at the routes that we already fund. That is not limited to the routes that we looked at in January. It's a much longer list. It's focused on that. It's absolutely also for if there are suggestions for routes that we currently do not support that could go into a broader network in the future. That's absolutely the kind of thing that we want to hear from people. But this review is not about the wider radical bus reform that we know we all need. And it's really good to hear the appetite for that wider radical bus reform in the committee, because I think it's something that all of us across the combined authority area agree on. The buses in their current state do not serve all of our communities, many of our communities, in the way they should. And that's absolutely why we are looking at what we can do to reform buses. So that's out of the scope of this particular paper you have in front of you. There was an initial paper around bus reform that also came to TIC. That was very much simply around pressing the button on auditing work. But I'm sure there will be a lot more papers coming through TIC, through board, and with the opportunity for committee to scrutinise here at ONS as well. We also need a new depot at Peterborough in order to support more electric buses right across the region. There is a paper that is going to board that has been through TIC as well, outlining some of the stages that are needed to get us to that point. Because I think, again, we all agree, the further we can get electric buses across the network, the better.
Edwina, did you want to come in?
Yeah, sorry, my camera doesn't seem to be working. I apologise. I think Councillor Smith has answered the question. I was just going to go back to the January board report to read exactly what the precept was to be useful. So I went back to the report, and it's just as Councillor Smith has said. But at the time, I'd raised my hands before Councillor Smith started to speak. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Did that cover your question, Councillor?
No, it didn't, but in the interest of time, I'll move on. Thank you.
Councillor Hassel.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the recommendation around the TING contract to March 2024. So are there any expectations if yeah, for people who are already used to using the TING service, is there a possibility that might end in March 2024? Or what is, if you provide a little bit more clarity around that, what the review of the TING service will entail and what the likely outcome would be, please. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So similar to all of the other services, we're looking at ways to improve the TING service. So at the moment, it's definitely meeting community need, particularly connecting people that don't have access to bus services in a scheduled way. But it's costing quite a lot per passenger that uses it. So we're looking at how we can improve the way demand responsive works in our communities to provide better value for money. And we're going to bring back recommendations around things like the operating area that it serves, how to ensure that it doesn't take journeys from other services, and that it really delivers that type of service that it needs to, which is about connecting the more disconnected communities into central hubs and market towns and other routes as well. So what we're looking to do, so the Ting or that service was originally set up as a trial. We've learned some things through that trial about the way it operates, and now we need to look at opportunities to improve that, provide better value for money, and bring back recommendations that on those lines, so that the board can consider, is that the right use of money for that kind of service, having refined and improved it, given the lessons we've learned from the first 12 months of operation.
Okay, just to come back on that, so thank you, Chair. So beyond March 2024, there's no absolute guarantee that existing Ting services will continue. They may be reformed, improved, but potentially taken away as well.
Yeah, that's the same for all contracted services, that they will all have that treatment, and we want to put them all on the same standard. Yeah.
And there's nothing unusual in that. It's just due process. There's no kind of additional agenda. This is just the process that we need to go through.
Councillor Smart.
Thanks, Chair. So it's been a long, wide-ranging conversation. So I'll just pick up one thing that came along later and then go back to my original point. So firstly, the sort of failing political support was mentioned, and also relatedly services to villages, which will be more of a problem to provide. Those are both really off this agenda. And I think the important thing going forward is that we all work together as political parties to get the best we can for our residents from the current situation, not to look back at what might have been. So my main point was to say, thanks, Neil, for the report. I think what Councillor Anna Smith said was really important and really good when she talked about consulting residents about the services they want. And I appreciate the comments that have been made since about consultation. But I would sort of think about it in a more sort of basic level, really. I remember when I was a councillor in King's Hedges talking to residents from about 2015 onwards on the Milton Road scheme. And Andy Campbell, who was the then boss of Stagecoach, stood up and said, well, we're just going to stop this or that service because it doesn't make a profit. So they literally would stop a service if that service didn't make a profit. So it wasn't about the whole company, it was just that service. And that was an abysmal way to run a service for the public. And as Councillor Smith has said, we want a service that meets the needs of people to travel around on buses. That's the important thing. And so bus reform is really what we want to get to, not the sort of service that a commercial outfit like Stagecoach seem fit to provide. And what that means is we don't want them to operate buses for profit, Chair. We want them to operate buses for people. And that is what we need to get to.
Thank you. Does anyone want to comment on that?
Say agreed.
Any other comments, questions? So I think we've done what we were supposed to do, which is had a good look at it and given a lot of comments. And then the recommendation on top of that is that we note it. Are we happy to note it? Yeah. And I'm sure we'll have buses back on here. Thank you all very much for coming. Now we've got increased connectivity focused on powered two-wheelers and road safety. So welcome, Tim, to present this. I should probably say, I think after this item, I will take a short comfort break because it's quite a long meeting. But I thought taking the transport as one batch is quite handy.
Thank you, members. And just by way of introduction, I'm Tim Bellamy. I'm the Head of Transport for the Combined Authority. You'll see that the paper is split into two to align with the request of the committee. Firstly, they're talking about Voy and the pilot in Cambridge, and not the wider use of e-scooters, the private e-scooter, but I will touch on that as well. Just by way of summary, in the summer of 2020, the DfT fast-tracked introduction of e-scooters as a green restart for local transport. In May 2022, the Queen's Speech introduced legislation on future transport, including a review of vehicle categorisation, and in October 2022, the board approved the extension of the Cambridge trial until May 2024. Just within the paper, but also just for clarity, there are a number of challenges and opportunities that will continue with regard to e-scooters. There's parking, tidiness, and road safety in particular, road parking in particular. In regard to safety, and I know this was an area that the committee wanted a review on, we do need to improve safety, but also the perception of safety. Currently, there's 77 serious incidents per 2.3 million passenger journeys. That's one every 30,000 trips. And there's more data in the appendices. With regard to carbon saving, we believe, having worked with Voy, that we've saved over 350 tonnes, and we've replaced 825,000 car trips. I know that members are concerned around repeat offenders and the antisocial behaviour of some of the users of the Voy scooters. Just for clarity, every 10 seconds there's a link back to the Voy system, so they know where all the units are, who's using them, etc. So that if any incident and accident do happen, they can be collaborated. And then Voy, who managed the project for us, offer training, but also repeat offenders, there is a possibility that we can ban them going forward. So what next? We're waiting for the result of the legislation from government, and this will allow us, if it is along the lines that we would hope it would be, allow us to look at the fleet size, the operating area, and our approach to parking, etc. And this is, as I say, inextricably linked with the legislation. And then also, following the agreement and approval of legislation, the combined authority will need to liaise with government and other partners around how to enforce the appropriate use of private e-scooters, because ultimately we are involved in the e-scooters trial, but private e-scooters, and we know that they do create a significant issue for residents and also businesses, and also across all of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and how we enforce that going forward and working with partners. So the other part is on road safety. So I know there was an issue and highlighted that people wanted a view on where we are on road safety. So safety, health and safety are key component part of the current local transport plan and the emerging local transport and connectivity plan. The subsequent local transport and connectivity plan splits health and safety because they're two different issues in themselves. Health should be around access to green open spaces, air quality, etc. And whereas the safety is around looking at road safety, perceptions of safety, and how we actually improve that going forward. So road safety in itself is delivered mainly through the 3 E's of engineering, education, and enforcement, and therefore is a key component of the whole package of the transport schemes that we have. The main objective of road safety is delivered through our work with the Vision Zero. This partnership is chaired by Mark Turner, who has over 30 years of experience with Bedfordshire Police, retiring at the rank of Chief Superintendent. The partnership itself includes the Cambridgeshire County Council, PCC, NHS, the police, National Highways, Fire and Rescue, Ambulance, Public Health, Cambridge University Hospital, the Air Ambulance, Road Victims Trust, and the East Anglia Trauma Networking, amongst others. The aim of the Vision Zero is contained within paragraph 2.13, and the example given in paragraph 2.15 is just one example of the work that they do. There are many more, but I just wanted to give a flavour to the committee. Funding for the delivery of road safety specific projects and initiatives thought for Cambridgeshire County Council, Peterborough City Council, and the combined authority channels, and therefore will form a key component part of the medium-term financial planning process within the combined authority. That's not to say that all of our schemes do not have an effect on safety, and therefore the safety audit and also due consideration of the various motives through all of our schemes. But just on the specific road safety scheme, that funding is thought through the county council, city council, and through some of our schemes, which are brought forward by things like some form of city fund project that we currently have. That's a mindful of time. I thought I'd take it through quickly. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Did you want to add anything, Councillor Smith?
I think that's an excellent summary. So in the interest of time, I'll just move on to questions.
Okay, any questions or comments? Councillor Coles.
Tim, forgive me, I've got quite a few, but I'll try to keep to plan and not go on for too long. I think the issue, as you quite rightly mentioned, for residents is that we have a significant number of privately owned e-scooters of indeterminate size, indeterminate speed, who are being involved in collisions that may or may not be reported adequately. My most recent experience was to almost get knocked down by a Suron, one of these e-trails bikes, which can do up to 45 miles an hour if you get the unregulated version. But there is one model that's designed for road use, but of course, who do we see riding those? Well, they're not very common, although they are available from a couple of dealers nearby. So we expect the police to enforce these sort of things. The last figures I saw, 5 privately owned e-scooters have been seized in the whole of Cambridgeshire over the last 2 years. Now, I might have the wrong figures there. That was the last figures that I saw. That's not great, is it? It's not unusual for me to see on the way into Peterborough 3 children under 12 on the same scooter riding up and down. The level of concern I have about their safety is extraordinary, really. It's good to see that we have the leased program is now being developed and potentially for further release. But actually, the problem is these privately owned vehicles, indeterminate size, indeterminate speed, run by people who possibly don't know what they're doing. A lot of the accidents are people just fall down because they're not under control. No licensing, no way of identifying who the scooter is, and no real rules on safety helmets. So while we would love to see a transition into a more healthy form of transport, this doesn't look too healthy to me. I just wonder what your views are on that.
I'm happy to give initial feedback, and then Councillor Smith may have a bit. Is that part of the legislation work that has been going from government that will allow then us to have the more powers? But actually, personally, I think that there are pros and cons of e-scooters. I think there are some of the positive things around if you're replacing some of our pedestrian movement with people going on electric vehicles in the first place, that goes against your health objectives. But there again, there are sometimes we're taking road trips away, so there's a balance there. But also there's a key point with regard to the role of the police in enforcement on this, and we need to liaise with the police about, we know where some of those hotspots are, and actually how do we educate? So it is about enforcement, but also educating. As you gave an example of 3 children on an e-scooter, what is the consequence? And it's similar to what we've had with back previously around people using seat belts, etc. We need to get that message over, and that's a collective view. So yes, the police need to have a role in enforcement, but we as a public sector body, along with others, need to be pushing that message about that. Yes, we encourage them, but in the appropriate use. But at the moment, private e-scooters should not be used on the highway at all. They are only allowed to be used on private land. So that message should be the message of it getting out there. At the moment, I think it's failing to do that.
I think you're right. I think it's failed dismally, and I think one of the issues maybe we need to consider is licensing of the sales side of that. Now, of course, some can be bought directly from China and shipped to you. So how you manage that, I don't know. But that means HMRC. So this is an extremely difficult thing to deal with. I just think we've lost the benefits that they provide by all of this activity going on, which isn't regulated. And I feel very uncomfortable that we seek to advance this as a solution when actually the problems lie in the illegal area.
Chair, if I may just come in to reinforce what Tim is saying there. I think the real issue that we have is that the role the combined authority has is around the licensing of the licensed scooters, and that's the piece that we are working on. It is the police's job to enforce safety aspects of non-regulated e-scooters. I can certainly hear very strongly from this committee that concern about those unregulated scooters. I think we all share that. I'm sure that there's something that, you know, a dialogue that we can have around getting the pressure on at both police level, but also at wider regulatory level, at government level too. And I think that's something that, Tim, I'm very happy to talk to you about outside the meeting, so that maybe that's something that you're able to feed back in your meetings with DFT officials next time you're in one of those meetings, in terms of the view of people in the room.
Councillor Rippeth.
Right, sorry about the delay on the mic. Just wanted to really comment that when there is a scheme like the Voice scooters in Cambridge and coming out to villages just outside, I think that might kind of reduce the number of the kind of more illegal use of scooters, because you have got something there, and they seem to me to be quite well used. The numbers you were saying about incidents of collisions are fairly small. I mean, obviously you can always make it better, but the more they've been around and people have got used to their visibility, I think that's something which is a good thing to support, and I'd like to see those made as a permanent fixture. And obviously they do reduce carbon emissions quite a lot, so we must bear that in mind. And potentially, would that be something for Peterborough? But I mean, I'll put that back maybe to Councillor Coles, since he represents the area.
Just to reply on that, so I think regarding the area itself, we have to go with the area that's designed by DFT at the moment. So we may well want to expand some of our Voy area, especially in Cambridge, but also across the region. But at the moment, because of the pilot, we have to align with DFT's expectations about where that scheme is. But ultimately, we would want to look at. We're looking at travel hubs across more rural hinterland, how you actually allow people to access things like travel hubs, etc. So there'll be one place there where the buses are, along with some of our skills and opportunities. But also at those locations, is it possible to have an e-bikes and allow people to access some of the rural areas? So that's where we want to get to. But at the moment, we can't get there because of some of the issues with DFT. And then with regard to safety, yes, it is relatively low, but we shouldn't rest on our laurels. One accident is a serious incident. So there are things around the accident perspective, but also on the Voy, we're working with them around the trip hazards and where parking are, because it's not just when they're being used, it's when they're being parked up, and making sure that people don't trip over have minor incidents. Because I've reported a serious incident, but there are a number of minor incidents as well. And we are working with Voy to address those.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, sometimes it does look like they're littered, and maybe something which is more of a structure where they could be dropped off, and so places it's a little bit more organised. Yeah, thank you.
Chair, just to add to that, this is something we're aware of. It's something we're looking into. We discuss this quite frequently as well with disability groups, because clearly it's made very difficult to walk around a city if you're suddenly faced with an e-scooter in your path that you weren't expecting. So this is something we are actively looking into with the companies at the moment.
Councillor Atkins.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, first time. There we go. One comment. Thank you. One comment and one question. The comment. Is there someone who can provide a bit of the national context around this issue of unregulated e-scooters? Because, I very much share some Councillor Coles's concern about the use of unregulated scooters. But I suppose one natural question would be, by partaking of this trial, have we somehow inadvertently given license to them? Or in fact, when you look at the national picture, are unlicensed scooters an issue in every city and town, whether or not we're running a trial anywhere nearby? I mean, to me, certainly the trial scooters very orange and very clear. It's not hard to identify which ones are legal and which ones are illegal. But I just wonder if we have any national context around, is this a national, is this almost the unregulated issue sort of almost completely separate from the regulated trial? So that was one question. The other comment I just wanted to make is that, and apologies to blur kind of my day job and my council job, but I did ask Voy whether they ran corporate accounts for businesses, because actually, business travel within the region is non-trivial. And certainly the business that I work in, there's a lot of people moving around, within Cambridge on a regular basis, and corporate accounts was not something that they did. And obviously that kind of obviously makes it much more difficult for businesses to encourage staff to use those rather than say, hopping in a taxi or something. So I wonder if that's something that could be fed back, that we're maybe missing a trick there with, the taxi drivers may not thank me for pointing this out, but in terms of reducing vehicle journeys kind of generated by business, it would be really helpful. But yes, if someone could comment on the more national picture, I'd appreciate that.
So yes, just on both of those. So we are constantly in contact with the DFT. So the national picture we can get from them. They have fed some of the funding into the appendix of the report. We can do a wider view around safety, but also the other element to that, so we can play that in. And also there may well be a view around where we are on the policing side. So DFT could do a piece, but there may be a bit around contact with the police, because ultimately they are the ones around the enforcement angle. So there may be a picture there. And then on the corporate account, I will feed that back to Voy, because I think we're missing a trick if we don't look at that. So I'll relay with them.
Councillor Smart.
Thanks, Chair. So this is a wide-ranging conversation. We agreed to bring this, didn't we, to this committee. It's been called two-wheelers and road safety. So that's interesting in itself. So I'm currently called the lead councillor for active travel in Cambridge, which used to be the sort of cycling councillor, I think, before. So it's just, I think it's useful to give a bit of context. So I remember 5 or so years ago, or maybe longer, talking about, and I will be as brief as I can, Chair, because I know time's getting on, talking about electric bikes. There are bicycles and then there were electric bikes, so bikes with a battery on, and they were becoming a bigger thing. And since then, time's moved on, and now we have the two-wheelers, as Councillor Coles has referred to, little wheels, so scooters, and the other things with bigger wheels, which are scooters as well, but look like motorbike sort of things, and other things as well. And I said at the time, all those years ago, that we were due to get lots of different things being invented as time goes on, and this will continue. So what we've got now is just a moment in time, is a snapshot. We'll get even more perverted and strange and wonderful beasts that will fly around on the public highway, electrically powered, no doubt. And we have to cope with it. And I think in terms of what we do as an authority, we're limited. I mean, my question to you, Tim, and thanks for the report, by the way, would be, can you sort out all the problems? Well, no, you can't, can you? You can't do anything hardly. And we need government legislation, but we haven't, this government has hardly done any legislation. It just sits on its arse and does nothing most of the time, except politic. So what we need is action from government, but we don't get it. Apologies for the language, by the way, Chair. So, and by the way, two-wheelers, well, I understand the basis of giving that sort of broad title, but it could be three-wheelers, four-wheelers, any of these things are possible. So we've got a problem, and I wasn't making a joke, by the way, at the start. It's a very serious problem, and people, for example, with disabilities, wheelchair users on the pavements are being bumped into by fast-moving electric vehicles, scooters and all sorts. It's all happening, especially in an urban area like Cambridge, and I'm sure in the villages as well, to a certain extent. So it's a real and present problem, but this is what we have. It's society, I suppose. What do we do? And this is the debate, I suppose. We can try to legislate, but even if you legislate, you can't make people do things. They'll just do what they want often. And in terms of the police, I mean, I said it's a wide range. I made notes all the way along. Police, well, what will they do? I mean, the police are so busy with much more important things like domestic violence that coping with a problem with a scooter, it's just not going to happen. So we look to the police. Well, you can look to them, but you won't get anything. So we're stuck. I think. Sorry to put it so bluntly, Chair, but I think that's where we are.
Just a couple of things on the title of the page. I know it does matter because it power two-wheeler, because traditionally they used to be motorbikes, etc., etc. So that's partly why the title's in there. But we are developing a micro-mobility strategy as part of, if the LTTP gets signed up on Wednesday, which will be a daughter document or child document to that. So how we do that modal bit. So all of the things that you are thinking about will hopefully be in there. On our actual travel side, and thinking about e-bikes, so we want to encourage e-bike because some of the longer distances, especially in the Fenland, we want to look at those and how we can actually reduce social isolation in some of our areas. So are they wide range integrated transport network. So we talked about buses previously, and if we can get e-bikes, so that you can get from your location in some of our rural areas to a hub or to a bus stop, and then allow those whether we can park at the bus stops or whether we can park at the hubs, or we can take those e-bikes, etc., onto the buses to allow people to go on the other end. That's where we want to get to. We want to try and increase accessibility, and that part of the whole big picture. But going back to your final point, Councillor Smart, was around government. We are waiting for government on some of this legislation, and the bit about the police is we can actively encourage and think on the active travel side. The county council, the city council, and the Combined Authority do a lot of work on behavioural change and working with some of our youngsters in some of the schools, etc. Bikeability and all those things that we've done in the past, which used to be cycling proficiency when I was young, those key points. We need to continue to do that on micromobility issues as well, and then outlining some of the concerns that Councillor Cole's outlined and trying to address that at source. So it's not just we get on it because it's the easy thing to do or it's cool or whatever. We need to get into that and start to educate people around what are some of the concerns around it.
Councillor Coles.
Chair, thank you. I'll try to be as brief as I possibly can. Councillor Rippeth, I mean, it would be lovely if Voi would come and put some e-scooters around, except we had a slight problem with the Voi e-bikes. They got so vandalised that they were completely withdrawn from the city. So, and my concentration on the illegality side is relevant in this particular area, because if we're going to get things damaged and people are just going to use private ones, we're back to starting point. My real question, though, is about separation, and that's one thing that the Combined Authority can do, which is on our design of highways and transport. And we need to get that right. And I think, as Councillor Smart says quite rightly, things are going to change over time. So there are going to be completely new things that we don't currently see. So how are we going to make sure that we separate out pedestrians, maybe pedestrians with disabilities, mobility scooters, and then we get to cycling and e-bikes and what the top speed is going to be of those and how they're going to work. And then we talk about motorcycles, and some of the ways of separating vehicles from cycles are extremely dangerous to motorcycles. There's a thing called an orca, which I don't know if people are aware of, but a little piece of plastic in the road is just the right height to take you off your motorbike if you don't see it and kill you. So there's a whole variety of issues that we have here. We have to sort out in terms of separating the different forms of modes of transport from pedestrian right the way through to a lorry, and to get that right in the right areas. And so we need to think about that now, but we need to be flexible enough that we can cope with these new things as they come. I just wonder whether we have thought that through so that we don't start building things in place now which don't work. You know, if we try and apply LTN 120, for example, then you are favouring the cyclist against all these other modes. And we need to make sure that we get it right for everyone. Thank you, Chair.
I'm happy to quickly come back on that. So the design of the strategic scheme. So my team take forward probably a dozen big strategic schemes. As part of that, we will look at the interrelationship between the various modes, because in getting the right traffic on the right road is part of the LTCP with the route hierarchy, and ultimately there will be times when priority needs to be given to the freight vehicles or whatever it is, because that is the predominant movement in that area and it's a safety element. Therefore, when we're dividing our dozen schemes that we're trying to do and working with partners, that part of the work we do, and when we're developing a business case or how we take those things forward, to understand what is the purpose of this scheme, what's the exam question we're trying to answer per se, and actually which modes are involved in trying to reduce those conflicts between whether that's cyclists or motorbike or cars, etc. So that's part of what we do with our big 12 strategic schemes. And say linked to our route hierarchy. The other point is that the Cambridgeshire County and Peterborough City are the highways authority, so the things like maintenance and the smaller schemes are driven by Peterborough and Cambridgeshire, and therefore through their highway committees and etc. That's where we, the combined authority, will feed in, but actually that for them to develop. So there's a bit of that. And then your last point about the LTM 120, if you look, we've gone back to Act Travel England and said actually in some of our rural areas, LTM 120 is not appropriate. So actually, rather if we want to put a significant scheme in our rural areas, how do we not make sure that we are liable if something happens with a cyclist in due course? Because in some of our rural areas, you wouldn't put the LTM 120 schemes in because it's just not appropriate because of width or whatever that might be. Therefore, there needs to be, and this is part of the conversation I'm having with Act Travel England and DFT, is there needs to be appropriate guidance at the appropriate level and from a very high level, and then we can filter that down through what we do at a combined authority, but also Cambridgeshire and Peterborough.
Chair, I just wanted to add one addition to that, which is to direct members to the relevant sections of the LTCP as well. For each authority, there is an appendix which sets out a range of potentially really quite exciting schemes that have been put forward that the combined authority will seek to champion. That's been done absolutely in discussion with those relevant authorities, so there shouldn't be anything in those appendices that relevant authorities aren't aware of, but it's a very useful document to look at. If we're able to pass the LTCP, it really will open a lot of possibilities out for improving transport for all users across the region.
Councillor Smart.
Yeah, so I'll just be brief, but just add one new point really is that, I agree with Councillor Cole that segregation is really the way to go rather than shared use, which was historic really now 20 years ago for safety. But in terms of what Tim said as well, and sharing space and the, what do you call it, the high learning how to use a bike, I forget what the actual, bikeability, whatever. So that doesn't happen with scooter riders, unfortunately, generally. So, and there's all sorts of conflicts, and even if we have segregated use, there are still problems. So, for example, a cyclist on the road might have a scooter undertaking them at higher speed. A person. So then we have public consultation on road schemes where the public are scared to go on the road, so they want shared use for their children and their mums and dads taking their children to school, so they want to go on the pavement. But it's a difficult one to get over, but segregation is definitely the way forward. But it's just getting to that and then knowing what to segregate where, and knowing that things are going to change anyway in the future. But problems.
Councillor Golsat.
Yeah, just a quick one, Tim, if you can help us with this. The issue in the debate is really centred around the use of these devices. Actually, the risk and the liability of it is more in the people close to those using it and not using it well. So somebody running into somebody, as Councillor Coles and Councillor Smart have suggested, segregating is a long-term answer, but that's going to take decades to get that road infrastructure. I see them very commonly used around Addenbrooks. I take my father to Addenbrooks very regularly, and you see a lot of people going into Addenbrooks, then coming out, parking the cars, then coming out, getting on the e-scooters, and away they're going into town. Surely what we should be doing as an authority is looking at what we can do about the liability in the event of an accident, taking the point, if not the colourful explanation of what this government is or isn't doing on the legislation side of things. I think surely we should be looking at what we can do as an authority from a liability point of view. And I think it was Councillor Coles, but forgive me if I got it wrong. Someone said earlier, could these be sold with an inbuilt price on there for the third party liability? I don't know. I'm thinking about different ideas.
So I'm happy to come back to you, Councillor Goldstack, around the actual liability, but there is a part of our contract, there is the insurance part of when you sign up to using part of the voice scooter, you sign up to the third party insurance delivered by Void, but I can come back with more detail in due course. But also as part of that, we need to make it more prominent. It's not as obvious when you're hiring one, so therefore that needs to be part of that going forward.
Well,
Councillor Smart made a very good point that, look, I know why we went down to the two-wheel definition, but if you've got a 4 to 6 miles an hour mobility car that's going along a pathway close to a shop doorway and someone steps out of a shop doorway, that's easily a broken leg, easily. You know, with the weight and the low hitting, I've seen them happen. You can purchase insurance for the use of a mobility scooter, right? Not every rider of a mobility scooter does so, but good citizens should be doing that. What I'm saying is, if you are I know you're saying they're on private road at the moment, so I'm assuming there's no way you can buy a private third-party liability insurance, and then because it's all been illegal, I suppose. Oh, back to square one then. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? No, in which case we're asked to note the report. Everyone happy to do that? Thank you. Now I suggest we take a 10-minute comfort break. So if we start again at 1:30. Thank you, members. We've got quite a bit of business to get through, and I'm conscious that some people are having to go to other meetings, and we need to make sure we remain quorate, which we are at the moment. So I'm going to rejig the agenda slightly to make sure that we take all the items that need decisions next. And I would ask members to bear in mind that we are tight for time and keep their comments succinct. Don't comment, because that's what we're here for, but keep it succinct. So thank you. So if we move to item 9, which is the Combined Authority Board agenda, and I know that Councillor Hassel, I think, wanted to say something on that, and Councillor Goldsack. Is there anyone else? No? Okay. Councillor Hassel, do you still want to say something on that? Oh, he's left, sorry. It's looking at Councillor Smart, sorry. He can't say anything then. Okay, so I'm going to skip item 10 for now and move to item 11, which is the access to information. Edwina, do you want to present this?
Yes. Can you see me and hear me well?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, committee. First, I want to apologise for not being there in person. I wasn't able to make it due to some personal challenges. So having said that, I will move on to the reports that is before you. The report actually came to the committee at its last meeting, and at that meeting, you requested that changes be made to it. Changes were made, and the draft of the report and the protocol, which is Appendix 1, was circulated to members. So thank you for that opportunity. Just to go back and remind the committee of the protocol. So this protocol is seeking to address an issue that has been raised by members about accessing information. Firstly, I would like to draw the committee's attention to paragraph 3.1. So paragraph 3.1 refers to chapter 10, well, mentioned as section 10 in the report, and rules 10.6 and 10.7 in the CPCA constitution. And that what those sections say exactly is mirrored in paragraph 6.2 in the report. So it's basically the same thing as what section 10 of the order, the 2017 order says. And if you look at the attached appendix, the same requirements are, or well, the same comments are mirrored in Appendix 1, paragraph 23 of the appendix. So if I start by sort of trying to explain the protocol. So there are basically two types of access, if I can use those words, or two levels of access, and two sets of members. So there is a general access for all members, and then there is an additional or enhanced, as the legislation refers to it, right of access to member of overview and scrutiny. The reason for that is because the Overview and Scrutiny Committee really is meant to hold the executive to account for decisions that are made and actions that affect their communities. The statutory powers given to them in the 2017 order, as I mentioned. And the law recognizes that an effective scrutiny committee should have, enhanced rights to be able to make the executive accountable and to make decisions transparent. So that is why there's an enhanced access to information. So if I'm hoping that explains the way the protocol has been drafted and the report itself. So there is the general, and I remember this was mentioned at the last meeting, there's a general right of members to have access to information that is to be transacted at a meeting. However, the enhanced right or available to overview and scrutiny members allows overview and scrutiny members to access information that, even though it's not on an item to be transacted, as long as it is part of the scrutiny functions, or it's part of what's it called, the works that have been agreed by scrutiny, then they can ask the information. The second thing I wanted to say is that I know at the last meeting there were some discussions around whether members had been denied access to information. That's not the case. The protocol and the report and the Constitution as it is mirror each other very closely. The reason why there are a few things set out in the report is to highlight to members that whilst there are enhanced rights, the law also recognizes that there will be instances where it will be legitimate for an authority to withhold information. For example, I give an example in the report. For example, if there's a confidential information. So for example, if we're negotiating with a bus company, for example, and part of those negotiations cannot be disclosed at the present time. There are also times where the authority would receive a grant from the government and we're under embargo as an authority not to disclose the figures. So there are times when we cannot disclose such information because it could expose the CPCA to litigation. Finally, just to assure members, whilst each request for information will be judged, I suppose, on individual merits, this would be information that would be asked outside of what legislation allows or common law. The CPCA's position really, and myself as a monitoring officer, is to adopt a default position of sharing information we hold with scrutiny members or with members, as long as it's within legal rights and will not expose the CPCA to either litigation or reputational issue. Because, for example, if we share commercial information and somehow that's known, then there is a reputational damage to the authority. So I just wanted to raise those points that had been discussed previously, just in rounding up to say that the default position of the CPCA and myself as a monitoring officer is to share information that is requested within the remits of law and common law. Also that all these documents, the protocol, the report, and the Constitution mirror themselves. So I will leave it there and I am open to questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Edwina. Councillor Smart.
Well, that all sounds fine to me. And I presume that if there was any problem with, say, a member going to, say, a junior officer, for example, and the officer not knowing whether the information could be passed on or should not be passed on, that that member could then check with Edwina or a senior officer. So I'm perfectly happy with that.
Any other comments, Councillor Coles?
Edwina, thanks very much. I just think there's a little bit in the protocol which is missing, because in the report you talk about that there must be a written reason why, if something cannot be seen by a member, then there needs to be a written reason provided for that. And I don't see that in the protocol. Perhaps I've missed it, but that bit I think I would like to see included in the protocol so it's very clear. The second issue for me is it's just about how do we know if an exempt piece of information is relevant to what we want to do if we don't know it exists in the first place and someone else has decided whether we can see it or not? I know that's a difficult one to answer because it's a what if, but presumably something is brought before you as the monitoring officer, and you then have to decide whether that oversight and scrutiny member or maybe a rapporteur needs to see it. And are you in a position to make that decision, or should there be some other means of alluding to an exempt report so that the committee itself can decide whether they really want to ask to see it.
Thank you, Chair. So to respond to the first question, the reason why that's not in the protocol, what you've asked to go into the protocol, is because it's in the 2017 order. So what the 2017 order says is if scrutiny asks for information from the executive or the mayor within 10 days, if they do not provide it, then they have to give written answers for it. So that's a statutory provision. No protocol, no constitution can go above that. Where there is a tension between statute and protocol or guidance, statute will always prevail. So that's why I thought there wasn't any need to insert that again in there. But I can, just for belts and braces, if that's what the committee prefers, but it is already in statute. Regarding the second question, I suppose overview and scrutiny will more than likely know when an item exists. So for example, on your work program, you would normally be scrutinizing board agendas. When those are published, there will be references to exempt items. At that stage, you would know that that exists. If there are matters that are on your work program or that you're doing a deep dive into, usually I would imagine that officers will mention that there is a document, but it's exempt for X, Y, and Z reasons. I do accept that there may be occasions where you might not know of documents that exist, either because it's not at the stage where that can be talked about. Like for example, the example I gave about the embargo from, for example, DFT or DFE, when they give us grant monies, it's written in bold letters, you're under embargo, you cannot mention this. Then we're obliged, because that will be part of the conditions of receiving those grants, then we can't talk about it. There is a fine balance, but I'm quite certain that most officers are aware of these issues and would usually, if you look at all the agendas, even maybe your agenda, the board agenda, it will refer to exempt items. I hope I've answered your question.
If I could come back, if I could see in officers' terms and conditions that was what they should do, then I'd be more confident. I don't know if I've seen that. I think also in terms of a protocol, it should stand on its own without having to refer to other papers. And I think what we have said in our pre-meeting here is if we could come up with a better way of ensuring that there's some explanation when we can't see a document that's visible to the public, that would be far better than not having it at all. And so that's why I would suggest that a process clearly delineated in one document in the protocol will be easier than for then individuals to think, well, I need to refer to somewhere else to see whether I'm justified or not.
Okay, thank you. That's
Councillor Rippert.
Thank you.
Just wondered if it might be kind of a straightforward way of doing this at the top of the document to have a statement saying it's accepted as a given that when you ask for information that it will be provided, and if it's the rule rather than the exception. So the exception being sometimes it obviously can't be provided for some of the reasons you've just mentioned, Edwina, that each member of the committee, sorry, not each member, the member who asks the question gets a written explanation, and just put that as a couple of sentences at the top of the document so we know that the emphasis of it is very clear, that we 99% of the time you'll be able to access that info, and the 1% of the time when you can't, you'll get an explanation, like it might be for commercial reasons or a legal case or whatever it happens to be. So should I propose that as an amendment to it?
Okay, so that's a proposed amendment. Is there a seconder?
Just to say, I already see, and Councillor Rippert, you will be able to see the exempt papers that relate to skills, and under those particular circumstances of contracts, you get to see them. So that isn't an issue because we're trusted that we will follow the protocols of the form. So that's why I'm having this difficulty with the current wording.
So is there a seconder for Councillor Ripper's suggestion? That yes, Councillor Hayes. Does anyone want to speak to that? Do you want to say anything on it, Edwina?
No, I think I do take the point, and I think maybe it's a matter of wording, because paragraph 2 in the protocol, which I highlighted in red, I thought I was making that clear that generally members will have, I'll just read the wording, that generally members will have access to information if it is required for them to fulfill the role. They are part of a committee. And then I talked about the additional rights, and I mentioned that there will be instances where confidential and exempt documents cannot be provided. So I thought that made it very clear that the general position is you will have access to the information. But if you want to reword it in a way that sort of says the default position is that you will have access to information, but there will be limited exceptional circumstances, something like that. And that if that's the case, then written reasons would be provided. Then I can certainly amend the section I highlighted in red.
Councillor Hayes.
I would be happy if you could amend that section in red to say it will be the default position that we will receive all paperwork unless there is overriding reasons not to, and that should there be overriding reasons not to, that we will be giving a full explanation in writing why it's deemed that we should not receive those.
Councillor Rippeth, are you happy with that change?
Yes, I think that's very clear and succinct.
Councillor Smart?
Yeah, maybe we've gone past the stage where I was going to speak, but I mean, maybe check what's just been decided with Edwina, I think. Maybe you would share anyway, but just going back to the belts and braces comment, I mean, I felt that the suggestion of writing something at the top of the paper was, you know, sensible, but the problem is if it then is, I mean, the thing with belts and braces is they can get twisted, can't they, between one another? And if there's a policy and then there's another statement somewhere else and they're not quite the same thing, then you have a problem. So it's better to write one thing in one place and that's the thing. So I you know, maybe it's good to change the wording somewhere or other if it suits people better, but I think let's just write it once somewhere and that's the thing we go by. That would be my thought on that.
So the proposal is that we rewrite paragraph 2 to make it clear that there's a default that we will get the information we ask for. There will be exceptional cases where we can't, and where that is the case, we will be given the reasons in writing. Yeah? And that's been proposed and seconded. So all those in favour? All those against? Abstentions? Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Structure, but I mean, I know we voted on it now, but that suggestion, wouldn't it be good to check it with Edwina first? I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but providing a reason why something can't be given might be something in itself that couldn't be given. So just thinking out loud.
I understood that we had checked it with Edwina, but I will double check it again. Were you happy with that proposal, Edwina?
Yes, as I said earlier, the 2017 order does say that if information requested cannot be given either by the mayor or the executive, then within 10 days, written reasons will be provided. So I'm happy to sort of mirror the wording of the order. Chair, can I just indulge and ask a question then, or make a suggestion actually to the committee? Obviously, this has been voted on and you want an amendment. I was hoping to take this to board in 2 days. Would you be happy for me to rewrite and consult with yourself as the chair the wording that I propose? And if you're happy with that, then I'll take the amendment to the board for approval.
So our members happy with that? That Edwina drafts it, agrees it with me, so that she can take the amended version to the board on Wednesday.
Yeah, I'm as proposed with that. I'm okay for you to delegate that to you to sort of check the wording and just make sure it's really clear and short and at the top of the document.
Okay, so with that amendment, with the wording agreed with me, are we happy to endorse this and recommend that the Combined Authority Board approve it? All those in favour? All those, oh, that was everyone, wasn't it? Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Edwina.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee.
So now we've got the appointment of rapporteurs to thematic committees, and we need to ratify the appointments agreed at the informal meeting for skills and employment, and we need to nominate and appoint members for transport and infrastructure and environment and sustainable. And we have a full set now, don't we? Do you want to read them out?
Thank you, Chair. So it's to ratify Councillor Coles and Councillor Rippeth for the Skills and Employment Committee. And the nominations received for transport was Councillor Van der Weyer. Was it just Councillor Van der Weyer?
Was it Councillor Smart? Were you going
Councillor
to do
Smart?
transport?
It was just Councillor Van der Weyer.
I thought there was someone else.
No, he was environment. He was environment. Or was it Councillor Niche? Was it Councillor?
That's right, Councillor Niche.
There we go. So it was Councillor Van der Weyer and Councillor John Niche for the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, and then Councillor Hassel and Councillor Goldsack for Environment and Sustainable Communities Committees.
So can I see all those in favour of those appointments? That's unanimous. Excellent. So thank you very much, committee. That's all the items that we have to take decisions on. So now we can go back to item 10, the corporate strategy and medium-term financial plan refresh process. Sorry, you've been waiting patiently.
So good afternoon. The report before you just highlights the proposed approach to the refresh of the current Combined Authority corporate strategy and the medium-term financial plan. As members will know, it's a statutory requirement for the Combined Authority and the Mayor to set an approved budget each year. And that has to be done in sufficient time to inform constituent councils so that they can then reflect the budget necessary budget implications in their own budgets. So in practice, this means the Combined Authority needs to have set and agreed a budget by the end of January 2024. As many of you will recall, as part of the improvement programme in January 2023, the Combined Authority Board approved both a multi-year medium-term financial plan and a 2023 to 2025 corporate strategy and business plan. So the paper before you is just outlining that in line with best practice, the proposal is that we take forward both the development of the medium-term financial plan and the refresh of the corporate strategy together, and we will take them forward in parallel. We are proposing for the corporate strategy a light touch refresh that recognises a considerable, it's a 2-year strategy, quite a lot of work was done prior to the adoption in 2023, and also next year we are entering the last year of the mayoral term. In terms of the time frame, what you will see before you in the report, paragraphs 2.6 for the next few sections, are the 4 stages that are being proposed. We're currently in stage 1, and the proposal is that that ends with the board adopting the timeline and the process that's in the paper. And the appendix highlights the key activities on a month-by-month basis. Stage 2
which then runs from immediately after the board through to the late October, is when we're very much kind of undertaking that internal review of the current corporate strategy. So taking stock 6 months in, and the approach to the development of the MTFP. So very much internal activity between the 20th of September and the end of October. My colleague, the Executive Director for Performance and Resources, isn't available to be here, but he has absolutely made the point in stage 2 of being available to talk to chief execs and talk to the relevant section 151 officers to inform at an early stage the development of the medium-term financial plan. Then moving forward, stage 3 runs throughout November, which is when board members will be considering the proposed activities that they would want to be seeing or in terms of the medium-term financial plan and areas of investment. And again, the Executive Director for Resources and Performance, who is also the Section 73 officer, will be continuing that dialogue and conversations with relevant board members and chief execs before we then come back to stage 4, which is essentially throughout December and January in terms of the consultation and an adoption. For you as members of Overview and Scrutiny, the appendix, you can see you're fairly high up, you're the yellow line, and today is obviously just bringing the proposed process to you, so it's an opportunity for you to comment and note the proposed process, but also I would particularly draw your attention to the November and December column and into January, where you can see there are some specific workshops that are being set up. Indeed, I think the date's in the diary now in terms of an independently facilitated workshop on medium-term financial planning and the draft budget, but also the use of future Overview and Scrutiny Committee meetings to receive more information in terms of what's looking like going into the medium-term financial plan and the corporate plan refresh. So this is almost the forerunner to those meatier discussions that you'll be having towards the end of this calendar year and into early January.
Thank you. Members, any comments, questions? Councillor Coles?
Just a very brief one. We've had the date of the 22nd of the 11th for budget scrutiny and training. Is that the element that you show on the yellow chart in the appendix? It is that date. It's not something additional.
No, one and the same.
Any other questions or comments? I'd just like to say I welcome bringing the medium-term financial plan together with the corporate strategy. I wonder quite how it was done before, so I think that's a very welcome improvement, and I look forward to this committee engaging with it as it progresses. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think it's a very good example actually of officers working across the combined authority to bring these two pieces of work together. So there are colleagues from a number of teams that are working to bring this forward to enable the more coherent and robust conversations and planning.
Councillor Smart.
Just chuck a little question in, Chair. So in 5.1, no direct financial implications. So I understand what that means and how it's normally judged, but I'm a great fan of zero cost accounting, and there will be a cost to the organisation of preparing this work, but I presume that cost is just not stated. Is that the case?
So the cost of undertaking the work would be the use of staff resource at this point being allocated to undertake this piece of work. That's correct. Yeah. But no additional financial cost beyond those staffing resources. Yeah.
Okay, so we're asked to note the proposed timetable and process. Happy to note that? Yeah. Thank you. Thanks very much. So then we're on the combined authority forward plan. So members to provide verbal update to the committee. I know Councillor Coles has. Has anyone else got any? Councillor Coles?
Thank you, Chair. Just on attending the Skills Committee, there were a couple of items of interest. One was the review of the performance of GrowthWorks is due, and there's a TUPE process currently going to move staff from GrowthWorks into the Combined Authority itself, which is hanging on to the expertise, if you like. But I assume it's not everybody, but there's a group that will be coming over, which is good. And the second one was further information on the development of 2 separate FE provision, which currently aren't there, and that was quite an interesting discussion about the cost of that and that process. Something to keep an eye on. But those are the 2 areas that I would update the committee on.
Thank you. Any questions to Councillor Coles? Okay, the draft work programme. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you, Chair. Just for the committee to express any interest in adding items to the work programme going forward and to agree it. Also just to make members aware of the 2 training sessions, one on the 11th of October on trading companies, which will be an online session, and one on the 22nd of November, which my colleague just referred to, for the budget scrutiny.
Any questions or comments? Councillor Goldsack.
Just one in general. Is there? I'm sure there's a very logical reason why we seem to flip between Peterborough, Huntingdon, Peterborough, Huntingdon. Oh, then we'll go to March, then back to Peterborough, Huntingdon, Peterborough, Huntingdon. What? I'm just wondering about Ely, Cambridge, South Cambridge, etc., etc.
Thank you. Yes, there is a reason. It's purely availability of the constituent councils when we go out with our dates. So if we go out and East Cambridge is not available, then we can't use East Cambridge. If Fenland's not available, we can't use them. So it's availability of our district councils.
Councillor Coles.
I was just thinking, in terms of our work programme, we're hoping to get a forward look at the board's forward plan, and I was looking in November at 28 items that need considering, and whether we need to put something in our programme about how we handle the board's future programme, so we know what we're going to focus on, as you know, trying to focus down on what we do rather than trying to deal with everything, because we've had so much to deal with today.
We could absolutely look at, within our informal meetings that we're putting in place, there's always an item there where we look at the forward plan. So we can maybe look to see how we can work down to scrutinise what items you want to look at on the board agenda going forward.
Any other comments, questions? No, so we're asked to note the draft work programme. Are we happy to note it? And then the date of the next meeting, an informal meeting on the 1st of November and the next formal meeting on the 27th of November. So I declare the meeting closed, and thank you very much all of those who stayed to the end to let us have a quorum.